And depending on which rule you violate, that could potentially be very scandalous. Now, these rules that each society has may be good rules, maybe bad rules, maybe neutral rules, but every society has a list of these rules. One may think of the Queen of England, who just passed away, and she had a very specific social code that dictated everything from how you eat a meal to how you sit to how you address people. And and I'm going to guess most of us, that was one of the things that we admired about her, was that there was kind of a propriety, a sense of order and that kind of a thing, okay? She was not a chaotic individual, that sort of thing, okay? Now, we also have that here in the United States. We have our own set of decorum, our own set of social rules and conventions. Even if it is disintegrating, we still do have one. And we have, for example, something that is not necessarily morally good or bad, but something just like manners, table manners, okay? It's just a set of rules that we kind of abide by. Generally speaking, and we all know what some of these rules are. Some of them are not as strict as they used to be, okay? You go over to someone's house, and instead of having the utensils arranged in the right order, you may just get thrown some forks or something. I don't know, okay? We have a tendency not to, as a whole, find a lot of value in that any longer. But there are some that we do. I mean, if you, a big cultural faux pas is if you go over to someone's house, like for the first time, and you open up the refrigerator and you start perusing and saying, what do you got to eat in this place, okay? Don't do that, okay? You see, there are certain cultural standards and rules that we have that we say this is appropriate and this is not appropriate. Okay, but let's take the refrigerator example. For Rousseau, in theory, if you went over to this person's house and you, in your heart of hearts, wanted to go through that refrigerator because you were hungry, okay? If you did not go through the refrigerator because of the social rules, then you would be sinning because you were not being true to yourself, okay? So Rousseau says there's a set of societal standards out there, and there are times and moments when my authentic nature collides with a social rule, and I have a choice. Door number one, violate the social rule and do what is authentic to myself. Door number two is to deny myself and follow the social rule, the social convention. Does that distinction make sense? Okay. So for Rousseau, for the Christian, okay, so let's give another example, because the refrigerator thing is not necessarily something that's sinful here. But let's say that, let's take theft, for instance, okay? Same rules apply here. Our culture right now, still, believe it or not, generally believes that theft is wrong, okay? There's some remnants of Christianity hanging on to our culture somewhere. Generally, we believe that's wrong. That's a social rule. And, by the way, it's a good one, okay? So for Rousseau, you are walking down the street and there's some vendors out and you see something that you want to steal. And in your heart, you say, I want that, I want to steal that, I think it's fine to take that for myself. For Rousseau, you now have a collision of values, and you have to decide which one you're going to choose. Am I going to deny myself and listen to the social convention or the social rules, Or am I going to break the social rules and live authentically? For Rousseau, anytime you are not true to yourself and you listen to the social rules, you have sinned. So you see how things can be very opposite here? So the Christian says theft is a sin, but for Rousseau, not stealing might be a sin, depending on if that's authentic you. Does that make sense? Okay, yes.
Yes, it does make sense. So, did you ever apply this to raising children? I'm just thinking, then the application, yeah, the application is you just let them run rampant, and that sounds terrible.
I don't know if he said anything about children specifically, but yeah, Evan.
In Rousseau's theoretical state of nature, there wouldn't have been a society to say there is such a thing as death. So in his view, that would have been ruled by two types of self-love, or actually by the good type of self-love. It was only when society came along, set up these oppressive systems, that we developed the bad type of self-love that wants to enslave and oppress and overpower and take extra possessions to ourselves. But his good type of self-love, he sees as like the source of morality, which is basically, I just want enough to take care of myself. So even in his examples of theft, he says he almost justifies himself by saying, I did this for somebody else's benefit or for my own benefit, rather than to gain extra riches for myself or to oppress people.
Yeah.
He has a very shaky understanding of origin of evil then, because if humans were born basically good, you have to create then some kind of point at which evil entered humanity, and I cannot recall any of his theories actually expositing on that, except that society just structures itself.
Yeah, it's basically the idea that when a society is formed and begins to structure itself, it creates certain rules. It creates certain obligations, certain conventions, and those kinds of things. And when it creates those things, it begins to impose on other people that you ought to behave in this kind of a way. And that's where the evil comes from. So, Jack?
The phrase I think you used, something like, man is born free, but everywhere he is chained.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
the idea that you're born free, but society has all these rules and you gotta follow them.
Yes. Yeah.
Did Rousseau have any touch points with the hard sciences? So, like, I mean, if you apply that type of reasoning to, like, I want to fly like a bird. So you get on a roof and jump off because I'm being true to myself. Well, you know, that doesn't work out too well. I'm wondering if any of his writing, you know, talked about that kind of stuff, or if he just totally was silent about those kind of things.
I don't know the answer. Someone else may know the answer here. You don't think so?
With hard science.
Yeah. I think, I'll go on a limb here, so to speak. I don't think that he would have talked about those hard sciences as being relative in that sense. I think he was more talking about morality here in those senses. So I think, again, to speculate, I think he would have said, if jumping off of a building is being true to yourself, then go do it. But I think he would also say, you're not going to fly, like the moral relativist or the postmodernist would say today, kind of a thing. So I don't know that his kind of relativism had extended into the hard sciences like it is in some areas today. But if anyone else knows any more about that, so.
It's just circular reasoning in the situation there, and that's what it comes down to, is it not? And that's what is being pushed today. I mean, there's certain major cities where the DA says if you don't steal over $900 worth, we're not going to prosecute you. So it's much, much deeper and ingrained in our society perhaps than what we realize.
Yeah.
It is being applied in many, many places on a regular, daily basis.
And that kind of is the point of all this, is to say that even though someone may not even know the name of Rousseau, just like someone may not know the term existentialism, they're thinking in those ways. And again, the thing that I keep coming back to is we have a tendency to think of ourselves as like the highest pinnacle of humanity. Like all of the humans that came before us were brutes, and now we are the smart ones, we are the intelligent ones. And not only that, but we have a tendency to think that we have come to the conclusions that we have come to today independently of everything else. Like I sat in my study and I pondered the mysteries of the universe, and I, of my own accord, came to these conclusions. Well, you came to the same conclusions that everyone else came to before you, and you rely on what they're thinking. So part of what I want to do here is there is some intentionality in drawing some connections between our modern way of thinking and some of the sources of those things, to say you're not as independent in your thinking as you think you are, and we have been influenced to think a certain way about the world. Now, by the way, I'm not saying that the opposite is true for us as Christians, but we readily admit that our thinking is constrained to this, okay? And I think I have to bring up the Chesterton quote that I brought up, I think, last week, and that is where he says there are two kinds of people: those who believe or accept dogma or teaching, instruction, and know it, and those who accept dogma and don't know it, okay? We as Christians accept dogma, we accept teaching, and hopefully we know it. What does this verse say about this, okay? I think one of the issues in our modern culture is that people still accept dogma, existentialism, Rousseau, so on and so forth, but don't know it, think that they've come to it independently. And I think that's part of what I'm trying to expose here, is all that.
So just trying to understand this further, and maybe from an apologetic standpoint, back to the hard sciences. So engineering would be an application of the hard sciences to do real things, build things, etc. And some engineering disciplines are more structured than others because they've had more time to develop, like civil engineering, for example. And within those disciplines, you even have what they would call societies. So back to your term of, society has imposed some kind of structure that can contradict the authentic self. And so that like a civil engineering discipline would have all kinds of structure within that they would expect their engineers to work within, so that when they build a bridge, it's safe for civilization to cross over. And so there's a sense where those people are operating within a societal structure that has been defined to make society better. And so they have to check a certain amount of authentic self when they function in those roles, and that's a good thing. So would that be, all that to say, would that be a certain type of apologetic to address somebody with that kind of a thought process? Like, in a practical way, there are subsystems within, there are sub-societies within a greater society that we agree, and you would, I would think, acknowledge is a good thing.
Yes, there is apologetic value in that, I think. An example of this would be, I heard a theologian comment one time, and I'm thinking of this off the cuff, so if anybody knows, there's a building, I think it was built recently, and it was designed to be kind of a testament to the modern way of, the postmodern way of thinking. And so the building had incorporated a number of different, Gothic and this and that, and it was just a hodgepodge of all sorts of different types of building styles. And it was a testament to truth is what you make it, you make your own truth kind of a thing. If anyone knows that building, I'd be interested to know, because but I remember a theologian commented on that one time, and he said, you might be postmodern, the building might be postmodern in its decorations, but it's not postmodern in its structures. Right? Because you can't make, I mean, a load-bearing wall has to meet certain parameters or it will collapse. So you can put your postmodern thinking in a photograph in the building or in the decoration of how the pillars are arrayed, but you cannot bring postmodernism into the way the pillars are. You can't have this pillar be this thick and this pillar be the thickness of a toothpick, okay? It's going to collapse. So I think that's kind of what you're saying, is that you can use, you're saying, can I use the hard science in my apologetic against this way of thinking? And the answer is yes.
Well, it goes further. So I'm the engineer. I built the structure, and I said I did this according to hard science. Do you believe me? How do you know that I actually followed the hard science? So then we get an inspector involved, and this is where the societal conventions come in. We believe as a society that it's good to have other people inspect my work to make sure that A, the plans were designed according to good engineering rules and that conform to the science, and that I'm not pulling a fast one on anybody with my plans. Secondly, that when it was built with concrete that was hardened correctly, et cetera, the right steel and all that kind of stuff. Bolts aren't missing. And so you bring in an independent third party to verify all of that thing. And so these are things that we as a society have agreed on that are good. So it goes beyond just a hard science. You're checking me now to see, and all the people that have been working with me to make sure we're doing our jobs.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think I know what you're saying.
And that's a
It is.
societal convention. You know, that's
Yeah.
a decorum, as it were. And I can't just,
I-
if I want to cut corners
Right.
and be true to myself because I feel like this is,
I don't know that Rousseau was thinking in those areas. Again, if someone else says that he was, I don't know, but I think it's more of, that's a little bit more of a, I would say that what the modern relativism, and there is a relativism in the hard sciences today. There are some people saying that 2 + 2 = 4 is a convention, and that 2 + 2 could equal 5 if you think it is, okay? There is that thinking. I think that's the fruit of some of these things, but I don't think Rousseau was thinking in those lines. Yeah, Evan.
So you're right, he wasn't thinking in those terms. If you apply Rousseau's thinking in terms of buildings and having a third party come in and inspect, I think what Rousseau would say would be humans' desire to subvert those building codes, right, and create unsafe buildings. No human being would desire that until those institutional structures came along and started imposing things on people, and then that gave them the desire to subvert those institutions. So in other words, no human being would knowingly create an unsafe building until those structures came in and started telling them what to do and how to build it, and that gave people that sinful desire to create unsafe buildings. And Rousseau wasn't actually a true relativist because he believed in right and wrong, but he believed that wrong came from human institutions coming in and controlling people and telling them what to do.
And to Aaron's point, I think putting all this together is he was not advocating for any kind of a relativism in those hard sciences, in those areas. He would still say that, this structure may be sound or whatever it might be, kind of a thing. Yeah.
I think it shows up today in the mentality that if we just fix the environment, that will fix the violence.
Yes.
I'm sorry, maybe
yes.
you're getting to that.
No, yeah, that is why there is So